Hello, scholars, and welcome to our screencast for Chapter 10, Section 1, Building a National Identity. I want to welcome you to this screencast because this is a unique opportunity for us. Instead of me standing there lecturing, you guys reading off of the board in complete silence. This is a nice way for us to accomplish the same task, but at your own pace. So if you're a person who likes to hear something more than once, you can feel free to go back and do that. If you think you just need to hear it the one time, then you may feel free to do that as well. We're going to tweak one of my favorite sayings just a little bit. So instead of read, listen, then write, what I'm going to ask is that you pause the screen when the notes come up, read them on your own, then listen to me explaining them and reading them, and then you're going to fill in your note sheets. So you're going to write last. And at any point, if you feel you need to pause or go back, it is totally up to you. This is self-paced, so feel free to do whatever is most comfortable for you. Okay, the first objective we hope to achieve in this screencast is to answer the question, describe the feelings or the feeling of national unity that followed the War of 1812. So after the War of 1812, Republicans took firm control of the government. That's Congress, so the Senate and the House of Representatives, and the presidency. The Federalist Party never really recovers from this loss. They never really win that power back in government, and actually within a few years they completely disappear from political life as a party. The Republican president that took control was James Monroe, who wanted to promote a sense of national unity, one nation, after the War of 1812. He makes what he called goodwill circuits of the middle and northern sections of the country. He just kind of went on a tour promoting that we are one nation, one big happy nation. And actually, even in Connecticut and Massachusetts, he got a very warm greeting from them, a very warm reception, and those were the only states that did not actually vote for him in the election of 1816. It seemed at this point that the old arguments over the War of 1812 had faded away. Newspaper reporters described this new sense of national unity as the era of good feelings, and the name sticks, and it is used to describe Monroe's 2 terms in office. In that second term in office, he actually ran unopposed. That's how high these good feelings were. Okay, look at that. We've already accomplished our first objective. So at this point, your notes should look something like this. If they do not, feel free to pause and go back. But if you're ready to go, then you may move on with me. Our second objective is to answer the question, how did Congress try to strengthen the national economy? After 1815, many Americans believed that the federal government should take action to increase economic prosperity in all regions of the country. Many ideas are given by various congressmen from across the country to promote that economic prosperity. Not all of them stick. We're going to talk about the steps that were taken by the government. But before we do, I want to just briefly mention some of these congressmen because they do become important as time goes on, especially leading up to the Civil War. The first we have is Henry Clay of Kentucky. He spoke for the people of the West who thought that the country needed better roads and canals to transport goods from one region to another. John C. Calhoun of South Carolina spoke for the interests of the South. He had their interests in mind. And at first he was a defender of this national unity, but as time goes on, he's really going to start to emphasize or place special importance or significance on the idea of states' rights. So not one big happy nation, but many separate individual states with their own needs. Last, we have Daniel Webster of Massachusetts. He became a spokesperson for the Northeast, and at first he opposed a high tariff, which, let me remind you, is a tax placed on imported goods. But later on, he started to see, this is helping us protect our industry. It is kind of getting people to stop buying foreign goods because they're becoming very expensive. So now they're going to buy goods made in America because there's not that high tariff, not that high tax. Okay. Since the first Bank of the United States had closed in 1811, remember that was a product of Andrew Hamilton's financial plan to get the United States out of economic crisis. The economy suffered after it closed. It had only been open for a short period of time. It had been given a charter, so a contract to be open for a short period of time. To cure this, Congress establishes the Second Bank of the United States. This institution lent money to individuals and controlled the money supply, and this gave a boost to American businesses. When the First Bank of the United States had closed, state banks had begun lending money to individuals and didn't really do it in a responsible way. So that kind of led to the economy not doing so good. With one institution controlling it for the whole country, made it a lot easier for businesses to prosper. During the War of 1812, there wasn't a competition for American goods. That means American companies were just selling to Americans, and they didn't have to worry about goods from other countries that might be cheaper or even like higher quality affecting them. That was because we had an embargo. So we weren't selling goods to other nations, and other nations weren't selling goods to us. So that was actually good for American businesses, believe it or not. After the war, the British were able to trade with the United States again. So they began dumping. Dumping is when you sell goods in another country below market price. So they're selling them for what, less than they're worth, but because they're selling so many of them, they're making a lot more money than they normally would. This drove a lot of American companies out of business. They couldn't afford to sell their goods for as cheap as the British were. Congress responds to this after an outcry by the public, wanting something to happen. They want something that's going to help keep their businesses open. So Congress responds by placing a high tariff, which is again a tax on imported goods, on foreign textiles, think like fabrics, iron, leather goods, paper, and other products. Northern manufacturers loved the tariffs. Remember, the North is mostly industrial factories that take raw materials and turn them into manufactured goods. Like many of the things I just mentioned above that we had placed a tariff on for the British. The South hated the tariff because they imported most of their goods from other countries. They didn't like it because they had to pay more. Simple as that. At this point, look at that. We've already answered 2 out of our 3 questions. How did Congress try to strengthen the national economy? You should have these 3 bullet points. And at this point, I think it's helpful to mention that you don't have to write exactly what I'm putting on this screen. You can feel free to write whatever you would like to summarize it. However, I do want to caution you that if you're not careful, if you summarize it in an incorrect way, where it kind of changes the meaning of it, that could come back to hurt you on a quiz or a test. So if you feel you really understand it, then please continue, summarize. If you feel like you need a little bit more practice with it, just copy it word for word, okay? All right, if you're ready to move on, you may stay with me. If not, then please pause. And look at that, we're on our last objective, which is to answer the question, how did Supreme Court rulings support federal power and economic growth? In one case, McCulloch versus Maryland in 1819, the Supreme Court protected the Second Bank of the United States. The state of Maryland thought they'd make some money off of this, and they tried to put a tax on the branch of the bank operating in that state, but the bank refused to pay. The Supreme Court, especially under Chief Justice John Marshall, decided that the states had no power to interfere with federal institutions. And in addition, it argued that states can't pass any laws that violate a federal law. So that means that any federal institution that you can think of, like the Department of Defense, the Department of State, the IRS, which collects taxes, even the post office, States can't pass laws that are going to interfere with what they're supposed to do. And all state laws cannot go against a federal law. So a federal law may contradict a state law. They might say the opposite of what the states say, but states cannot go against what the federal government says. Another case, Dartmouth College versus Woodward, also in 1819. The Supreme Court argued that the charter of Dartmouth College in New Hampshire was a private contract. Let me remind you that a charter is an agreement between two or more parties that can be enforced by law. Ooh, no, I apologize, that is a contract. They argued that the charter was a private contract. So, in protecting those private contracts, the court protected private businesses. And by protecting businesses, you're promoting capitalism. Capitalism is the economic system in which privately owned businesses compete in a fair or free market. Free market meaning that the government doesn't really regulate it, or does not regulate it too much. Businesses can kind of do whatever they need to do to get ahead. Make sense? Our last case we're going to talk about is Gibbons versus Ogden in 1824, and the court again supports federal power. It ruled that the state of New York could not give a steamboat company a monopoly, and a monopoly is the exclusive possession or control of the supply or trade in a commodity or service to carry past. So you're thinking of the game right now, and you're absolutely correct. What's the goal of monopoly? Is to own as much of the board as possible, correct? Make the most money. So the same thing. So if they're talking about the service down a river to move passengers, especially from New York to New Jersey, the states couldn't give that power to just one company. They can't have sole control of it. That's what a monopoly is, when you have sole control of something. In this case, moving passengers down a river from one state to another. The court claimed that moving from one state to another, moving people or anything from one state to another, falls under interstate commerce, and the Constitution clearly says that only Congress can regulate interstate commerce. So Gibbon v. Ogden and McCulloch versus Maryland very clearly are used to defend the power of the federal government. Dartmouth College versus Woodward very clearly used to defend private businesses or an economic institution. Okay, so at this point with this question, your notes should look something like this. If they don't, obviously you can pause and go back to correct that. If they do, I'm going to remind you to please complete the summary question on the back of your sheets, and it should say, how was the power of the federal government strengthened during the era of good feelings? Thank you so much for listening, and I hope for you to join me again for Chapter 10, Section 2. Have a lovely day.